Everyone's here. All righty, everybody. Quick intro. For those of you who haven't met me before, I think you probably all have. I'm Stacy. I'm the executive director here at Bucks Audubon. We want to thank you very, very much for joining us for our Nature in Your Backyard Lunch and Learn series. Since we can't do as many things in person as we would like, we are excited to be able to offer some fun virtual things. This particular program is meant to give some great basic information about all of the plants and animals that we might find in our backyard, and help get everyone really, really excited about our Bioblitz, which we are doing on our site, socially distanced, in October. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but today we are talking about birds. If you've missed any of the past ones, they are up on our YouTube channel. So you can go there and see reptiles and amphibians from 2 weeks ago and insects and invertebrates last week. So I'm going to turn this over to Diane Smith, our Director of Education, who I consider our resident bird expert, and let her take it away.
All right, well, hi everybody. Nice to have you all. The topic today is birds, which is an enormous topic. It was really hard to try and pare it down to something that we could fit into our Lunch and Learn series. So I will mention that periodically, usually about once a year, I do a beginning birding program, which would be great if you guys wanted to join that and learn some more, a little bit more in depth about how to find and identify birds. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll see how this does. We're going to and we're up. All right, so let's begin at the beginning. Okay, here we go. So this is our opening slide. We are doing a 7-week, is it, Stacy? 7-week course in various types of wildlife that can be found around the Honey Hollow to try and get people interested and excited for doing our Bioblitz. A Bioblitz is basically a one-day inventory of everything we can find in a particular location. So it can be all kinds of things: plants, animals, bugs, birds, any of that fun stuff. So it's called Nature in Our Backyard, and here's the schedule. So we are on our 3rd of 7, and today would be birds. So talking about birds, the study of birds is called ornithology. Like reptiles and amphibians were herpetology. Studying birds is called ornithology, and a great resource for any of you that are interested in learning more about ornithology is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You can go out to allaboutbirds.org or just look up Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they have got an amazing number of resources all about birds. So you can certainly increase your depth of knowledge by going out to their location. So what about birds? Birds are unique. They have feathers. They're the only creatures that do. Not counting the extinct dinosaurs that everybody says now have that had feathers. And birds are in fact related to dinosaurs. Birds also have bills, and they come in a wide variety of bills. And they have morphological and physiological adaptations to flight that make them capable of crazy feats of navigation and long distance migration. There are birds that migrate from way up in the Canadian tundra all the way down to Chile twice a year. It's an amazing feat that they can find their way back and forth. And a lot of studies are still ongoing about how they do this. Generally speaking, it's thought that they use the magnetic fields of the earth to guide themselves. There's also some thought that they do a little astral navigation using stars. I don't know if that's correct or not, but this is still an ongoing field of study for scientists. And if any of the other birding experts out there, Leroy or Sally, want to type something into the chat about anything about migration that you might want to add, please feel free. Any questions you guys have on the way, please also put them in the chat. Okay, so I think everybody really wants to know how to find out what a bird is. So generally speaking, we talk about something called jizz, which is a general impression of size and shape on the bird. Excuse me a second. Get out of here. My dog is deciding to get in my lap. So general impression is how big is the bird? And you want to compare it to something that you know. Is it, say, the size of a robin? Is it the size of a blue jay? Those are birds that almost everyone knows. And then there's, what about its shape? Is it long and thin? Is it short and round? Is it got shoulders? You know, when it puts its wings up, does it have, you know, kind of shoulders like this? And what is the shape of its bill? The shape of its bill will tell you a lot about the type of bird that it is. And what about the wings? Are they pointy? Are they rounded? And the same with the tail. So all of those characteristics will tell you a lot about the bird and help you identify what it is. But the most important thing for you to do when you're trying to figure out what a bird is to look at the bird. There is no substitute for, stop. There is no substitute for taking a good hard look at the bird and getting as much detail about what it looks like focused into your memory. Not to go taking off and looking into a guidebook or into an app on your phone, because the bird will only sit still for a certain period of time, and you need to use all of that time for observation. And then if you need to, you can go and start looking through your guidebook or deciding what it is. And all of those details that you have seen will help you with identifying the bird. All right. So I'm not going to go into this. I cover this in the Birding 101. I have this picture up here just so you can take a look at some of the places you can be looking for details. So we've got places on the head, around the eye, on the breast, the various parts of the wing, and certainly take a look at the feet. The feet are very interesting, and the way the bird is using its feet can tell you a lot about the type of bird that it is as well. Most of the birds that people are familiar with are perching birds, and their feet have 3 toes forward, 1 toe back, and at rest they are clenched, so that's how birds can actually sleep sitting on a branch, because their feet automatically grip the branch because of the shape of their feet and the way they are constructed. Then you can go into the various parts of the head feathers. And again, these are details that you want to be looking at with your binoculars so that you can remember some of these characteristics. Not that you need to know all of the fancy names, but if you look at the details, it will help you when you then try and identify the bird. So back to bill shapes. The shape of the bill will tell you a lot about what the bird is eating, okay? So long skinny bills, short fat bills, bills that are probing into nectar. So if you take a quick look at this slide, you can see that a heron's bill is very long, very sharp, and it's used for snapping up things like fish, as opposed to the hawk's bill that's right underneath it, which is heavy and has a very sharp point on it, and that is used for its carnivorous food when it has to rip into its prey with that sharp point on its beak, and so on. So you can see the woodpeckers have long bills for digging into trees and taking out insects. So a little bit about insect-eating birds. Most of our songbirds are in fact insect eaters, and they have relatively small bills. And these are things that you're going to want to look at if you're trying to look at the type of bird that you have. So you've got warblers have very thin, short bills. Wrens have slightly longer bills. And those are strictly insect eaters. And then you start going into birds that have a more varied diet. And as a result of their more varied diet, their bills are constructed differently. So when you have birds that eat both insects and seeds, or insects and fruit, their bills become a little bit heavier because they need to be able to have a slightly stronger bill to break into the hard outer coating on a lot of those seeds. So going into more birds that are primarily seed eaters, again, their bills get heavier. You see the goldfinch and the grosbeak over on the right has quite a heavy bill, and that is for breaking open those hard shells of sunflowers and other types of hard fruit. And then birds that are more Catholic or more varied in their diet have a more general purpose bill. For birds like robins or blue jays that are more varied in their diet have a kind of a general purpose bill. So those are things to be looking at when you look at a bird to try and figure out what it is. We do have available on our website a bird checklist of the 100 or so species that you're likely to run across when you come out to do the Bioblitz. Or if you just want to come out and do a bird walk with us, we do bird walks twice a month, first and third Saturdays. So I guess that means this Saturday there's one, and we start at 8 o'clock at the visitor center. And so what you'll see on this checklist, which is available on our website, which birds are here all year round, which are found in the winter, which are found in the summer, which are migrants. So it's a 2-page list. I only put 1 page up here, but it's useful for knowing what you might be able to see when you come. So let's talk about the birds that you might be able to see when you come. So the first group of birds that I want to talk about are birds that are known as raptors, or birds of prey. These are the birds with the sharp hooked bill, the very strong talons for holding onto their prey. They are carnivorous, and generally speaking, they're solitary. They don't flock, they don't live in communal groups. They do form pair bonds, so you might get a pair, particularly red-tailed hawks. The pairs tend to like to hang around together. And we do have several different kinds of raptors that we do see relatively regularly, and that will most likely be present when we're doing the Bioblitz. We have 2 kinds of vultures. We have turkey vultures and we have black vultures. And since we normally see them overhead, that's the type of picture that I put here, because one of the easiest ways to distinguish between the 2 types is by the underside of their wings. Down in the bottom right is a turkey vulture. You can see that the feathers on the wing have that sort of silvery look to them all along the length of the wing. Whereas the black vulture has only got that silvery touch on the very ends of the wings, the parts of the wing that I like to call the fingers, because they look kind of like the fingers on a hand. The tails are different, the body shapes are different, but the easiest way for me at least to distinguish between the 2 is to look at the underside of the feathers. Interestingly, when turkey vultures are young, they do not have that red head. So they will have a gray head, and because of that, it's easy to confuse a young turkey vulture with a black vulture because their heads are about the same color. But if you look at the underside of the wing, it gives you a good indication of which vulture it is that you're looking at. And they are soaring birds. They're usually high up. When they soar, they hold their wings in a V shape. So that's one of the ways you can distinguish them from some of the other soaring birds that you'll see, like hawks. We have got 3 hawks that we see relatively regularly. The red tail, which is in the upper left. And the easiest way, of course, to think about that one, especially if it gets backlit by the sun, is you can see that the tail is a really nice kind of rufous color. And then the sharp-shinned and the Coopers, we have both. They look an awful lot alike, and so it can get very confusing. The sharp-shinned is a little bit smaller, and its tail is a little bit more square. So that's the one on the bottom left, and the Coopers is the one on the right. So these are our 3 most commonly seen hawks. We do have several others that we see during migration, red-shouldered, rough-legged, but they're not very common. But if you should happen to see one of those, that would be exciting to see. And owls. Now owls, we're most likely not going to see because they're nocturnal. But if you're out early in the morning or late in the afternoon, you might hear them. So I'm going to try and play. Hopefully the sound will come through my computer. I'm going to try and play the sound. This first one here is a great horned owl, and it's the sound of it is typically what people consider to be the sound of an owl because it hoots. It's the owl that says hoo. Oops, whoop, 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 whoop. Go back. Go back. Hate when my computer does that. See if we can hear it. So that's a great horned owl. And then here on the bottom right is a screech owl. These are relatively common. They're not shy. They like to hang around where people hang around. So I know the first time that I ever heard a screech owl in the wild, I thought someone was torturing a horse because the sound of it sounds like a whinny, or what a horse would sound like. So let me play that for you. So that's a sound that you might hear, in the woods at night. It's a little spooky sounding. And the third owl that we do have around, although it's not quite as common, is the barn owl. We have lots of barns in the neighborhood. I have found barn owl feathers on the trail, although I've never run across a barn owl flying over our fields. Although I have to say I'm not usually in the fields at night, so it's possible that they're there, because I have found their feathers, but not them. And they have a completely different sound compared to what you would normally consider to be an owl sound. It's more like a scream. So I play the sounds for you because, like I said, they're nocturnal. You're not likely to see them, but you are likely to hear them if you're out at the right time of day. And using the sound of a bird is really, generally speaking, a key to being able to identify some of the birds that we have around. A lot of folks will start to hone in on the location of a bird by hearing it first. You hear a bird making a call, you can kind of triangulate with your head as to where you might be able to look for it, and then you can start looking for where the bird is. So sound is very important, not just for owls, but for other types of birds as well. And then we have waterfowl. There's a different variety of bill shapes depending on the type of bird that you have. They all have webbed feet because they're in the water. And they do have a variety of diet. Some of them are plant eaters, some of them are more carnivorous, and some of them are omnivorous. The ducks that we could potentially see on Audubon Pond are some of the more common ducks. So we have up in the upper right, we've got wood ducks. We do have wood ducks that nest on the property. They are cavity nesters, so they are often found in trees. They're very distinctive looking. They have very bright colors. The male has very bright colors on its head, and the female has a white teardrop shape along its eye. And if you see them, up in a tree and it's a duck, you're probably pretty well convinced that it's going to be a wood duck. On the left, we have got the ring-billed duck, which is an interesting migrant that we might run across. I checked into some of the records of when we see this duck in Bucks County, and it is a possibility for sure to see that. I did have, a few years ago, I did have quite a collection of ringnecks on the pond. There was about a dozen of them, or maybe 20 on the pond, and that was quite a thrilling sight. And then, of course, in the bottom right, we have our mallards. Mallards are pretty much what everybody thinks of when they think of a wild duck. And they do have dimorphism. The males and females look different. So if the boys have that very iridescent red head, and the females are just kind of plain looking. But these are very commonly seen on our pond. Some other birds that we might see on the pond. I have to admit that the one on the top, the merganser, I've never seen on our pond. But I like the look of them, so I put it in there. And you do see these on the Delaware. You see them on some of the creeks around, some of the faster running creeks. So they're a common bird in Bucks County, but we haven't been fortunate enough to have them on our pond as yet. Solitary sandpiper is next on the left. The mudflats that are at the head of the pond often host these guys. I've seen them, numerous times, numerous weeks. Walking in the mudflats. You can take a look at that bill and you can see that it's a probing bill. It's used for digging into the mud, which is why it likes to hang out on the mudflats. So again, you want to take a look at the bill and help you identify which bird it is. In the center, the great blue heron. eating an eater of fish and frogs, both of which we have in the pond, and it's a very common bird to see on our pond. They're a little bit shy, so they do tend to fly if they see us coming, but they're also very obvious in flight. And they also will roost in trees, so you may see them lifting off the pond and then going and settling in a tree not too far away. On the right-hand side, eating what looks like a crab, is a green heron. They may be gone by the time we do the Bioblitz. They are a summer resident and they do migrate, but checking into the records, we have had records of them being seen as late as November, so it's a possibility that they might still be hanging around. On the bottom left, everybody's bird that they love to hate, the Canada goose. They are here all year round. Some of them migrate, some of them are resident, and we see them just about every time we go down to the pond. And then on the lower right is a mute swan. I've only seen one on the pond one time, so it's not likely that we'll see that one, but they're really pretty, so I wanted to put it on there. And they are seen on a lot of the ponds in the neighborhood, so you never know when one may decide to come on over and visit us.
Hey, Diane, before you move to the next slide,
yeah,
we did have a question about the difference between bills and beaks.
2 words for the same thing. I use them interchangeably. I prefer bill. Leroy, you want to chime in there? You have any difference between bill and beak?
The spelling.
Spelling. It's basically 2 words for the same thing.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay, and then we have the birds that most people think of when they think about going birding. The small, beautiful, brightly colored birds that sing us awake in the morning, especially in the spring, our songbirds. There are so many different kinds of songbirds. Most of our songbirds belong to, or all of our songbirds belong to the order Passeriformis, or called passerines. And more than, gosh, I think it's more than 50% of all the bird species in the world belong to this order. So it's almost easier to say which birds are not passerines than which ones are. So lots of differences in plumage, and the plumage will also vary between the spring, summer, winter. Some migrate, some don't. The diets are enormously variable, everything from nectar to insects to seeds to fruit. So there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of variation and a lot of beautiful birds to look at. So let's take a look at some of these gorgeous birds. This is a group of birds that are called mostly thrushes. Bluebirds on the upper left. The male and female, again, are different looking. The males are a much brighter blue. The females are kind of more of a grayish blue. They are here all year. And in the fall, when they start to look for places to roost and stay warm for the winter, they do tend to congregate in larger groups. In the breeding season, it's generally a pair bond, and they can be very territorial. So you'll see a pair and not another pair for 100 yards or so. But once the breeding season is done, they do tend to kind of flock together a little bit more. In my own yard, at one point I had a group of 6 or 7 males all trying to get into the same nest box to use as a roosting place. So they're a lot less territorial when they're not in breeding season. In the top middle is the northern mockingbird. It's got a very long tail. It's got a bright white flash when it flies. It's the only bird around that really looks like that. We don't have really another bird that has that long of a tail and that bright white flash. In the upper right, we have the hermit thrush. Relatively secretive bird. It's around all year. It's not as brightly colored as its cousin, the wood thrush, which is a little bit more rufous in color, but wood thrushes generally leave for the winter, and the hermit thrush will stay around. Then on the bottom left, the American robin. People often consider this to be a sign of spring, but they are here all year. And the reason that you don't see them as much in the winter is because they're not hopping around on the ground. In the summer, spring, fall, they're insect eaters. They like to hop around on the ground looking for worms and other insects that they can eat. But in the winter, when the ground is frozen and that food source is not available to them, they move up into the higher reaches of the trees and become more berry eaters or fruit eaters, as well as looking for insects to glean off of the trees. So in the wintertime, you just have to look up a little higher and you will likely see some robins. Then there's, this bird is a brown thrasher in the middle on the bottom. They are here all year as well. They're a little bit secretive. They've got a really long tail, but you'll see them hopping around in piles of dead leaves, under bushes, scratching around looking for insects. And then on the right bottom is a gray catbird. These guys may be gone by the time we do the Bioblitz. They are migratory. They do not stay for the winter, but there have been sightings of them as well into late November and December, so they may still be around. And they're very distinguished by their call. They actually do sound like a cat. They sort of meow in their call, and they're very distinctive with just having the gray body, a black stripe on its head, and a little bit of red under the tail. So these are all birds that are relatively commonly seen on our property. Then we have sparrows. Sparrows are some of the more difficult birds to identify because there's a lot of them. They look a lot alike and they're small, so it's hard to get all the distinguishing characteristics on them. So we have on the upper right, song sparrow. This is one of the easier ones. It's got that kind of condensed group of spots in the center of its breast. Below that is a bird that we only have in the winter. It's the junco, the dark-eyed junco. One of the defining characteristics of this bird is that bright white belly. When I'm talking to kids about this, I describe it as a bird that looks like it sat in a bowl of milk. Going around the circle to the left, another bird that we only see in the winter, but it does get here usually in late September or early October, so I expect we'll see some of these. This is the white-throated sparrow, easily distinguished by that white patch under its bill and the kind of bright yellow spot in front of its eye. These come in several different color variations. They're not always this brightly white on its head. Sometimes it's a little bit more tan. And then the tree sparrow on the upper left. Very kind of plain bird, just sort of indistinguishable. So that's one of the things that makes sparrows so hard. A lot of people call them LBJs, little brown jobs, and just let it go with that. Some more birds that are relatively common. I put two pictures of chickadees here because we do get both of these. Black-capped chickadees on the left used to be the more common of the two species that we get here. But since the climate has been warming, they're not as commonly seen. They've been moving farther north. And the one on the right is a Carolina chickadee. They're nearly indistinguishable. A lot of people just say chickadee species. But if you look at the one on the left, you can see that it's got a little bit more white, kind of in a upside down hockey stick shape on its wing. And that lets you know it's the black cap. On the bottom left is one of my favorite birds. That's the Carolina wren. Very noisy little bird. Very, very vocal, and it's got a very big voice for such a tiny bird. In the middle on the bottom is one of the two nuthatches we get. This is the red-breasted nuthatch. Only in the wintertime do we see these. Not very common. It's always very exciting when we do run into one of these, but we do see them periodically in the winter. And then the white-breasted nuthatch on the bottom right is one of our very common birds. One of the ways you can distinguish it before you even get a good look at is it tends to be going down trees upside down. It likes to go down trees head first, which is a very unusual behavior. I don't know of any other birds besides nuthatches that do that. So it's one of the birds that's kind of easy to identify by behavior, as well as by the way it looks. And then we've got some other feeder birds. Up on the upper left, we've got our cardinals. These are northern, they're called northern cardinals, but they're the only ones that we do have. The male and female are different looking, and these are year-round residents. On the upper right, there's goldfinches, and I put two pictures there because the goldfinches, everybody thinks of the bright yellow goldfinch, that's the male, and they are that color in the spring and summer in breeding season, but then they go kind of dull, and the females and males get a little bit harder to tell apart, and they look like that other picture, kind of olivey green. So that's when you start needing to look at the bill shape and other kinds of characteristics to say, yep, that is a goldfinch, even though it's not the beautiful bright yellow color that we see in the summer. In the center are a pair of finches. These are house finches. The male has got the kind of orangey red color to it, and the female does not have any color. And then on the left are the brown-headed cowbirds, male and female. These are interesting birds. They do not make their own nests. They parasitize other birds' nests, lay their eggs in other birds and move in other birds' nests and move on and let their young get brought up by other species. This is another bird that is a little less common in the winter, but we do have them throughout the year. And then on the bottom right is another one of my adorable little birds. This is a tufted titmouse. Males and females look the same. Very common feeder bird. Big, bright black eye and a small gray crest. Easy to distinguish. So we have other birds that aren't songbirds. Their voice boxes are not constructed to allow them to sing, so they're not songbirds. Generally speaking, they have two toes forward, not always. Sally has been educating me on the differences between birds that it makes it very difficult to give some distinguishing characteristics. So we'll just talk about what they are. So we've got woodpeckers. Woodpeckers, the birds that I have here, the 5 species I have here, are all commonly seen at Honey Hollow, the Bucks Audubon site. The 2 on the left, one on the top is a hairy, and the one below it is a downy. This is one of the problematic identifications for a lot of people because they basically look the same. They're black and white birds with a red spot. The downies are a little bit smaller. The hairies are a little bit bigger, but there is enough overlap in size that that's not the distinguishing characteristic. So what I want you to focus on for distinguishing which bird is which is the length of the bill. If you take a good look at the downy up above, its bill is very short for a woodpecker. And the one below it, the hairy, if you look at the length of the bill is almost as long as the length of its head from the eye to the back of its head. So if you see a bird that's black and white like this with a red spot, and it's got a long bill, it's a hairy. If it's got a short bill, it's a downy. Then on the upper right, pileated or pileated woodpecker. This is our largest woodpecker that we have. This is for those of you as old as I am, this is the woodpecker that the cartoon character Woody Woodpecker was modeled on. Their call is quite distinct. It's kind of a laughing call. It's a very large bird and it has a very bright white crest. You'd think they'd be easy to see because they're so big, but they're not. They're very good at hiding, but you can often tell them by their distinctive call. Then in the middle on the right is the red-bellied woodpecker. And everybody says, well, why is it a red belly? I don't see any red belly on it. In breeding season, they do have a slight rufous cast to their belly, but there's another red-headed woodpecker that actually has a red head all the way around. So that's the red-headed woodpecker. This is the red-bellied. Again, a very distinctive call. Once you've identified that call, you'll never forget it. It's something that, if you come for a bird walk with me, I'll point it out to you, and then you'll always know when you're hearing a red-bellied woodpecker. And then in the bottom right is a flicker, a northern flicker. Sounds a little bit like a red-bellied, but very distinguished by its black necklace that it has. A lot of them are golden shafted. If you look at the bottom on the tail, you can see that there's a kind of a very bright cast to the feather there, and they're called yellow shafted flickers. Then we've got the birds that are black. So up on the top left is a crow. We have two kinds of crows, American crows and fish crows. We get them both. Nearly impossible to distinguish unless you hear them. The sounds are quite different. Fish crow sounds like an American crow with laryngitis. It's a kind of more nasally. Now the bird on the right, if you look at it closely, you can see it's not a crow. It has a much heavier bill. And if it was in flight, you would see also that it has a differently shaped tail. This is a common raven. And this bird, if you look through the records, you'll see that it's called a rarity, but it's becoming more and more common in Bucks County. There have been lots and lots of sightings of them, lots and lots of hearing them. And I haven't got a good explanation for anyone why they're becoming more common, but they have been seen a lot more regularly in the area. So it's there as a reference for you guys to take a look at. And it's got a very distinctive call. It's kind of a cronk sort of sound. Again, quite easy to distinguish between some of the other calls you'll hear. On the bottom left is a grackle. Very pretty bird, very iridescent. The middle is blue jay, again, quite a common bird. Also very noisy, but very easy to distinguish. And then on the bottom right is a starling. Starlings are not native, but they are quite common. The starlings are one of the birds that was brought over, gosh, I guess it was in the 1800s. Someone in New York decided that Central Park should have all of the birds that were mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. So they brought over a bunch of birds that weren't native here and set them loose, and we've been dealing with it ever since. But starlings, when they gather in very large concentrations, will often fly together in packs in beautiful patterns that are called murmurations. And so they're quite exciting to see that way as well. All right, so that is a quick overview of some of the birds that you're likely to see. So I want to talk a little bit about the Bioblitz. There is an iNaturalist app that you can download to your phone, and you'll find it at www.inaturalist.org. It'll be in the App Store for your Apple. I guess I don't know what Android uses. I guess it's Google Play. And we do have a project set up. And if you are interested and you can go through some of the tutorials on the iNaturalist site. It's very easy to use the app. It's slightly more complicated to sign up for projects, but it's really quite simple. And if you have any trouble with it, you can certainly give us a call and we'll walk you through it. But the app itself is very easy to use. Basically, you find something, you take a picture of it. It will give you an opportunity to find out what it was that you saw. And once you can distinguish between what you have and the recommendations of the app is one, and share it. And if you come out to the site between those dates, October 24th and October 18th, any of the observations you make on our property will automatically get added into the Blitz project. You can also come back and see what everybody else does. Now, for doing observations of birds, the odds of you catching a picture of a bird with your phone are probably pretty small. So what you can do is you can open iNaturalist on your device, and once you click on Observe, you get the screen that I have a screenshot here of. And if you look down in the lower left-hand corner, it says no photo. So you can click on it, and then it will take you to another screen where you can enter your data. So you can put your observation into iNaturalist and into our Bioblitz database. It will not ever be research grade observation, which means it hasn't been verified through all of the various data checks that iNaturalist does to make it a research grade observation. But for us, for the purposes of the Bioblitz and our inventory of the animals we see, it's still valuable information to us. So I encourage you to go ahead and do that, even without a picture. If you're lucky enough to get a picture with your phone, absolutely use it. But if you observe a bird and you want to put it into our Bioblitz data, this is how to do it. And this is us. This is the iNaturalist page with some of our observations. You can see the picture on the map. You can see that large clump of observations. That's us. All right, I think that's it. All right, let me stop sharing. So,
Everyone, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask Diane.
I know that was an awful lot, and I went through it pretty fast. But it's hard to get a lot of birding stuff in the 45 minutes that were allowed for lunch and learn. So I apologize for as fast as I went, but please, any questions, please do ask.
All righty.
I could
All right.
yeah, I was going to make a comment, just one quick comment.
Yeah.
Back to the, when you were talking about general impression, size and shape, one thing I would add to that is behavior, watching the bird's behavior.
Good point. Yes,
Because
behavior just gives you a lot of clues too.
Give you a lot, you know, the habitat and behavior. But great presentation.
Thanks, Leroy. Yeah, I mean, jizz is, general impression, size, and shape is jizz, but then adding to jizz, yes, behavior and habitat are the next two keys for identification for sure.
I have a question, and I want to apologize for coming in late. I had a phone call about my husband who's in a nursing home, so I had to deal with that first. So about using the application for Bioblitz, I don't have enough room on my smartphone for another app. So can I use that on my tablet, an Android tablet instead, and send an email then with what I record?
You can use your tablet. In fact, I believe that when we did our first Bioblitz, we were loaned, I think it was a half a dozen tablets from DCNR. And you can actually take your tablet out with you and use the camera function on your tablet. You can put the iNaturalist app on there and use it exactly the same way as you would with your phone.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And again, bird walk this coming Saturday, 8 a.m. Come on out. We'll take a walk.
Okay.
And next Wednesday at noon, our lunch and learn is going to be on trees and shrubs. So all of your woody plants next week.
Great. I love trees.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Stacy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.